Good morning to everyone. My name is Paul Wee and I'm the chair of the ERM Committee with the Singapore Actuarial Society. Today is Friday and it's the last day of the SAS Super Week, but in actual fact, it is the start of various activities that we have lined up for 2021. So I'll just like to take this opportunity to also open the session today. And I'll be kicking off today's session, briefly talking about today's session. And secondly, I'll be talking about actuaries and climate risk. Distinguished guests, life actuaries, general actuaries, health, retirement, investment, and aspiring actuaries. Welcome once again to the ERM session of the SAS Super Week 2020. We are very happy to have all of you attend this morning's session, despite all the incidents and events that are happening in 2020. First of all, I'd like to thank you all, the sponsors that have funded our event. A shout out to all the generous sponsors. These are the sponsors here you see. Without these sponsors, this event that we have will not be successful. All right, I'll just quickly talk about the 3 C's that we are seeing today as in the world and as an actuarial community. COVID, cyber, and climate risk. Well, they all start with C, so I'm just referring them as 3 C's. 2020 has been a very tough year in the economic sense and also for the insurance industry. Basically, it's disrupting everything that we have, how we work, affecting our businesses and how we live, and basically will present new challenges as we work in a new normal. So basically 3 main areas that we have to be concerned about as actuaries are in terms of pandemic and in terms of how these pandemic modeling could affect and become an emerging risk for the insurance industry. Cyber risk is a new area with the digitalization of the economy and with things becoming more and more online, autonomous vehicles, and with intangible assets. And last but not least, we have cyber risk. We have climate risk. Climate risk is fast becoming a longer term issue that is emerging on the horizon. It is something that is a naturally occurring event that has far-reaching consequences. So altogether, we need to think in terms of common themes of how to address these common challenges. Capital. Basically, as an insurance industry, we will be affected by capital strain, and we need to assess the solvency impacts by doing stress testing and understanding the risks and uncertainties that all of these areas will have on us as our business. The second thing is that we need to understand how to collaborate more effectively among ourselves as an actuarial community, and also to provide adequate thought leadership within our functions and also intra and within the other parts of the economy that are all interdependent on each other in the ecosystem. This collaboration is very important, and the Singapore Actuarial Society is well placed to help the actuarial community in this area. And the third area that we need to think of is in terms of competition, basically at our personal level, and also in terms of how we as actuaries can actually enable us to have a more sharper competitive edge among all these 3 challenges, because pandemics, cyber, and climate risk are definitely things that are totally different and at the tail end of the distribution. And basically, it could mean 2 things. One is that if you don't take a proactive view, we could actually end up losing your competitive advantage, or you could actually stand out by having a well-planned approach to addressing this in a very different way from everyone else. So coincidentally, these 3 themes also have starting with C. So I call this whole session 3 C's to address and 3 C's, 3 common themes as solutions for these challenges. So against this backdrop, I'd like to launch off today's session. As you can see, we have a very full and packed agenda today. After my opening address, we're going to start off with risk for autonomous vehicles and also talking about the issue of how cyber risk can evolve with autonomous vehicles being more commercialized. We're going to also then follow up talking about government level risk management with a presenter talking about some applications of the Wang transform and how governments can use that to better price loans. We're going to talk about climate risk index that the Singapore Actuarial Society is doing, and this is actually something that we are trying to take forward in the region, starting with Singapore. And finally, we will be talking about epidemic risk modeling in business risk interruption, business interruption impacts on during COVID. So these are very broad topics that will actually introduce a full range of areas for all actuaries to talk about. In an afternoon, we're going to talk about sustainability risk management, whereby we look at how to quantify situations broader that affect the economy and to end up being sustainable in the era of climate risk. We're going to talk about business cycles and procyclicity and how to be actively monitoring the dependencies that you face in the in seasonal ups and downs. And then we're going to have three exciting cyber sessions by the vendor modelers, and this will present various angles of cyber risk that we should actually take on even after this super week session to actually have more specific discussions. So these cyber sessions are actually, they took a lot of time to bring to all of you in the SAS. We actually have to shift one of the sessions to Wednesday because we don't have the time. So definitely cyber models are becoming more and more prevalent, and with the industry-wide stress tests coming up next year, cyber and climate risks are actually two things that we hope to support all the actuaries to better quantify and to better approach qualitatively and quantitatively. So definitely, we hope this lineup of programs here will definitely give us some discussion points and areas to act on in the coming months. All right, so having gone through the agenda, let me move on to my other topic, actuaries and climate risk. Actuaries and climate risk actually is the one of the coming up hot topics that is emerging or has emerged, and we need to revisit as actuaries all this time. Okay, actual science, data science, and climate science. Okay, so these phrases ending with science, actual science, data science, and climate science. So the baseline for us as actuaries is we have all qualified and we have all done all our foundations, and we are all very familiar with all the theories and applications of our beloved profession as actuaries. Then we have data science, and this expands our circle of knowledge into structured, unstructured data, artificial intelligence, and all those kind of good stuff, machine learning and all that. And now we also have climate science. So climate science is also something that is intersection with geological effects and all those very complicated, very interesting things, because these are all man-made effects that need to be modeled. So really, why do we really need to be interested in climate science as actuaries? Firstly, because of the ongoing disruption to our business and lives, we need to tackle this issue collectively and contribute our expertise as actuaries to the global effort. Okay, now specifically for supporting the insurance industry, it really is important to understand where protection gaps and insurance opportunities will exist on the life and the general insurance side, even social security systems. This is because climate risk poses great challenges in restructuring how it could potentially change the nature of the entire economy as over the next 10, 20, 30 years, given the way sea levels rise, given the way the business changes from moving from where it is now into a different, lower, more friendly climate environment as it transitions into that. So this has broad-reaching implications on the whole economy and for the insurance industry. So we as actuaries need to be at the forefront to understand where and actually how we can contribute and make sure that we are doing our job in climate risk well. In the immediate term, understanding climate risk is very important because we are seeing a whole area of regulatory and professional requirements coming up, like the TCFD, the task force for climate risk disclosures. So these are all coming up, which actually requires us to quantify qualitatively or to quantify or to discuss qualitatively or quantify our potential exposures to climate risk in a variety of contexts. Regulatory requirements are also coming up. We have the industry-wide stress tests, as I mentioned earlier, that require us to address climate risks in a very interesting manner. So we definitely need to be interested, and we definitely need to be more. We can't have the view that climate risk is just something that is going to happen. We're not part of it, because it's just like the frog that is in the hot water. The water is slowly boiling and you don't realize it. And one fine day is when it starts to boil, it's too late already and you're cooked already. So definitely we have to be interested and we have to start looking at climate risk now. Now, just out of some observations, climate risk is basically what is the real link? Actuarial science, data science, and climate science that I just mentioned. Basically, the point is that there's a lot of data that can be used in whatever form, and how we use this data will definitely benefit the analysis and the projections and whatever methodologies we're going to apply. The second thing is that uncertainty is definitely one of the issues that we need to resolve, and because of the nature of the far-reaching distance that we're looking at and the complexity of the problems, we definitely need to have data-related tools to address and model these areas of uncertainty, which are all interlinked and all interdependent. Okay, there's been a recent consultation paper on climate risk, which has been released by the International Actuarial Association. It's actually just recently released, and we have to, and it will be of very good interest to all actuaries and related interested people, risk managers and regulatory people. Now, this application paper on the supervision of climate-related risks in the insurance sector actually supports a few developments that is needed for actuaries to take note, building on from the earlier IA papers on climate risk and stress tests. The key message that this paper has is that we have to explicitly consider climate risk under several of the ICPs, the international standards, which the regulators will adopt in the respective local regulations. And it's very important, and we shall see that eventually we'll be embedding climate risk in our governance and in our actual functions. Basically, we have to be able to consider and reflect climate risk in whatever processes we are doing in an appropriate manner. Okay, of course, there has to be some sort of transition measure, some sort of education training plan out, because most of us have to have the requisite understanding and requirements to understand the requirements that are needed to address climate risk in our daily work. So this consultation paper is still open, and I encourage all of us to take a look at it. I have sent, it is already on the link on the SAS website, and we have until the 4th of December to reply to the International Actuarial Association. I have sent an announcement a few weeks ago with this paper attached and some of the past papers as well. Now, the broader issue that we're looking at is how to embed climate risk in our actuarial processes, okay? Because as the actuarial function, risk managers and actuarial function holders in the earlier paper, we eventually will need to have a way to adequately reflect the various elements of climate risk in the way we price, reserving, and in the way we do our cash flow projections. So also, we have to bear in mind that this has to be linked to the various ongoing efforts that the company has in proportionate terms. And we have to work closely with the underwriters and client managers and with the business to understand how we transition from that area. So we really need to have a good view on the portfolio aspects between climate-related clients and what exactly CO2 emissions means for when we move away from one state to another state. I would suggest that we apply some sort of a building block approach. Now, a lot of people have been talking about doing stress testing, applying pathways, and so on and so forth. But really, it's a bit jumping around because it is very important to understand what we as actuaries globally and in the SAS know about climate risk first. So a building block approach is actually proposed where the SAS is working together with various stakeholders. This building block approaches focuses on some core areas that we need to look at, for instance, number one, awareness. What is our level of awareness of the landscape and the regulations, the local regulations and the global disclosure requirements that are required. This includes all the specific stress testing and how we actually report and quantify all these climate-related exposures. Data is very important because we need to really understand what is out there basically and how we can use it. Like for instance, when we formulate a climate risk index, understanding the data and the level of granularity that is needed is very important. A later session by Davey will talk a lot about this climate index. And the third area I'm proposing is tools and methodologies are something that we need to collectively do some research and understand in how we can actually use the data and actually apply these in the appropriate manner to forecast and create stress testings and to actually develop proper stress tests in line with our actuarial theories. Okay, so these tools and methodologies must be able to lead on to embed in our processes. So as I mentioned, climate indexes are a very good form of the building blocks because this will form a way to analyze the past, and from then on we can use this to link on to whatever approach we are doing in quantifying and approaching the problem of having stress tests for climate risk. Okay. Now, stress tests for climate risk. So there's, as I mentioned, regulatory direction has been creeping up. We do need to have, as an actuarial profession, some way to address this issue, to answer ourselves internally and also to address any the immediate need for the industry-wide stress test next year. Okay, where there's a climate risk and also a cyber, which I didn't mention here. So as I mentioned, the building block approach will require us to understand the representative pathways used by the IPCC and the various academics bodies, but that is really quite difficult because we really want to understand how to translate RCPs into economic losses and insured losses. So this is very important. And it's very difficult to understand without understanding climate science. So we need to have visibility on all these this whole backdrop that is very important, and getting this right is important to understand first before we start on climate stress testing. Okay, now I would just like to stress that chronic and transition liability risk of climate risk is very difficult. So this is where we have to work together. Physical acute is actually something that most of us in the NatCat side are familiar with. Okay, so having gone through these areas of climate risk, I'd just like to take a step back and use this opportunity to advertise what's next with the SAS ERM Committee. We are also going to host a few more conference afternoon forums and if not webinars on climate risk, cyber, and AI modeling in various times next year. Now we're going to try to have a climate risk training session with a local school here, or with a person who is very familiar with climate science. This will help in the industry-wide stress test preparation and further internal information that is needed. We also try to, following on from today's afternoon session, to have a cyber panel discussion, okay, with vendors that are in touch with this. This includes topics like silent cyber and how to model cyber accumulation and whatever current topics you may have. So feel free to provide your feedback on cyber this afternoon. We will then actively follow up on the climate risk index that I have mentioned earlier, because this is the least that we can do as actuaries in Singapore, and I hope that we can then take it on to the other actuaries in other parts of the region in ASEAN, for instance, because we really want to build the momentum and to firstly link up with the academic bodies and with the regulator. And then once we get the climate risk going, then climate risk index going, then we can start to have a seat at the table to discuss more issues with the relevant stakeholders. We also concurrently will have more joint sessions with this risk management center, SXCREAR. Okay, Mary Kress will also elaborate this at her session later on. There's a lot of theoretical research and ongoing topics that we can jointly address with the SAS. There's one on the 10th of December as well that we'll be mentioning later. Last but not least, I'll use this opportunity to mention we will be having some internships, and any call for volunteers, as usual, will be more than welcome, because we are always having various projects, and we need people at all availabilities to raise their hand to try to help us. Okay, so with all this, I think I run out of time. We will be moving on to the next session. Okay, so thanks a lot.